How's it going, folks? Graham Juice and Matthews here, back with another edition of WrestleRant, reviewing the 2007 installment of WWE Backlash as seen on the WWE Network. If you haven't already, go back and check out my reviews of the 1999 through 2006 installments of Backlash. All great shows. 2007 kind of continued that streak. And I've had a lot of people, like I said in my past few videos, note to me on Twitter at WrestleRant, cheap plug, that they've actually gone back and watched some of these shows, and I don't blame them, and I strongly suggest that you do. That Backlash was one of the most consistently entertaining shows of the year, as is Extreme Rules for the most part, since its inception in 2009, which I will be reviewing, by the way, starting on, I believe, Sunday. But Backlash was always awesome. This show is also very, very good too. But make sure to check them out on the WWE Network for yourself. The 2007 show kicking off with a tag team title match for the World Tag Team titles between the Hardys, Lance Cade, and Trevor Murdoch. This was actually a rare show in which almost every single title was on the line, which is weird because that's usually reserved for Night of Champions. It's a whole theme of it. There was not one non-title match on this show, looking at the wiki page right now, so that's really, really weird. But nevertheless, kicking off the show for the World Tag Team titles, Hardy Boys, Cade, and Murdoch. Decent match. I mean, these two tag teams, had a lot of matches, had a long series of matches at Backlash. They had another match at Judgment Day, and then Cade and Murdoch won the belts right like in early June, I think the night after One Night Stand, and they had another match at Vengeance. And I never really was a huge fan of the matches these two teams had. They were good for the most part, but they weren't great to the point where we needed to see them every single pay-per-view. You know, I thought the match at One Night Stand between the Hardys and World's Greatest Tag Team was exceptionally better than the matches that these two teams had. So why couldn't we have gotten more matches with them instead of Cade and Murdoch? And I never disliked Cade and Murdoch. I thought they were always a solid addition to the tag team division. They were a good team. They had good chemistry together, but I was never a huge fan of their in-ring work. They had some good matches, but they never had that one great match, in my opinion anyway. From what I've seen, I had yet to see them, or I've yet to see them contest that one truly amazing match. And Hardy's always had those kind of matches. They passed that barrier in 2000 when they had amazing matches at WrestleMania 2000 and WrestleMania 17 respectively. It's that they broke that a long time ago. But Cade and Murdoch, I don't know. As contenders to the titles, I was never a huge fan of their work. And they got one of the longest matches on the show. They got one of the longest matches on the undercard anyway, coming in at almost 15 minutes. So they got good time, but I mean, the match was solid. It wasn't bad at all, but it wasn't great either. It was, pretty formulaic tag team wrestling. The crowd was into the Hardys, so that was probably one of the, not saving graces, but one of the highlights of this matchup that probably prevented it from being a lot more flat. It would have been a lot flatter had the crowd not been into the Hardy Brothers, at least as World Tag Team Champions. They were always over with the audience, so you never had to worry about that. But a decent match, nothing too great, but a fine way of kicking off the show. Up next for the Women's Championship, Melina defending against Mickie James. I don't know what Mickie James did to get another shot at the title, because it was weird. They had Melina beat Mickie for the belt on like an episode of Raw in, I believe, either February or March of that year, so like about a month or two before this pay-per-view. And I think they had a rematch on Raw in a Falls Count Anywhere match or something like that. And then they had Molina defend the belt against fucking, I think, Ashley at like a WrestleMania 23 and like a terrible Lumberjills match. I talked about that in my WrestleMania 23 review here on the channel, G-Plug, if you want to check that out. And then they went back to this feud, so maybe they didn't have enough legitimate contenders for Melina to contend for the belt. She would eventually lose the belt to Candice Michelle a couple of months later, who did improve, but I mean, she would not have been my first choice to give the belt to. So I guess they either didn't have enough strong face divas on the Raw side of things or what, but the match itself was good. I mean, I think Melina does not get the credit she deserves for being a great worker. I think she was one of the better athletes to grace the Divas division, to grace women's wrestling in WWE. And at least the last decade, I thought she was always really, really good and always had her character down pat. Mickie James, nothing needs to be more said about her. An amazing talent, one of the best of all time, future WWE Hall of Famer, first ballot, no doubt. They had a good match, got about 9-10 minutes. So, I mean, like I said, it was a well-wrestled matchup, but without a story behind it. And although the commentators did acknowledge that it was Melina who beat Mickie for the women's title, there wasn't really much of a story beyond that. Maybe something happened between the two of them on Raw before this, but they didn't really recap it on this show. And like I've said time and time again, for most of the pay-per-views, beyond 2008, the pay-per-views that I have not seen before, or I'm not familiar with, like the build-up and shit, I don't watch the build-up. I don't watch the aftermath. Sometimes I will read it up on Wiki or other stuff if I'm interested. But for the most part, though, I don't read up on that kind of stuff. And I hope the commentators would fill me in, fill in the gaps and stuff like that. They did not do that successfully on this show. And there might not have been any gaps to fill. No sexual joke, and pun intended, I guess. But, they didn't really tell much of a story. It was a nice match that I can't complain. A lot better. A significant improvement over Molina versus Ashley from WrestleMania 23 a couple of weeks earlier. But still, it was hard to get invested in anything they did because Melina and Mickie didn't really have, it's not that they didn't have history or chemistry or anything like that. It just didn't really have much of a story behind it, so I just didn't really care. But it was nice to see Melina pick up the clean win and continue to be built strongly as a dominant heel women's champion. Up next for the United States Championship, Chris Benoit defending against MVP in another rematch from WrestleMania. And a match I thought was even better than the WrestleMania bout. And a lot of people, in WrestleMania 23, one of the greatest WrestleManias of all time, I didn't overly enjoy it. I thought it exceeded expectations, kind of sum up my review of that show in a nutshell, after I reviewed it a couple months ago here on the channel. But the match itself, I always thought at WrestleMania was underrated. Was it a great match? No, but I thought it was really, really good. And it was more about MVP being put over strong and looking strong in defeat, in which he did against Chris Benoit. That was the whole point of this feud, was to build up MVP as a legitimate threat to the SmackDown guys, to whoever. The guy went from feuding with the fucking Undertaker and Kane in late 06 to going for the U.S. Championship. So it did say something about the credibility of that title at that point. The U.S. Championship, in my mind, still meant something around this period in time. I can't pinpoint when it stopped meaning something, maybe around 08 or 09, but back in 07, after Benoit held the championship for about 7 or 8 months, it still meant something at that point in time. So, MVP having another impressive outing here against Chris Benoit, another really well-wrestled matchup. Another exciting bout from a wrestling standpoint. Like I said, MVP looking strong in defeat, and it would later lead to him picking up the belt at the Judgment Day pay-per-view the following month. So it would lead to that in the 2 out of 3 count falls match. And Benoit was always over, whether he was holding the World Championship or not, whether he was IC champion, US champion, world champion, tag team champion, whatever. The guy was always over with those crowds. So good stuff there. I thought it was a really, really good match. Another better than the WrestleMania match, which is saying something, because I thought that was a good match. And we'll have to wait and see how their Judgment Day match is, which I will be reviewing here on the channel. After my Extreme Rules reviews, I'll be talking about every Judgment Day installment ever. So I look forward to that. But another really good match from Benoit and MVP. Benoit retains, still the United States champion. Up next, a handicap match, a 3-on-1 handicap match for the ECW World Championship. So this is stemming from WrestleMania 23 in the Battle of the Billionaires matchup, when Bobby Lashley represented Donald Trump and Umaga represented Mr. McMahon. And of course, Lashley winning that matchup with Stone Cold as the special guest referee, and McMahon getting his head shaved. So he would not take lightly to that. He would hold a grudge against Bobby Lashley and look to make his life a living hell over the next couple of weeks, booking himself in a 3-on-1 handicap match at Backlash with Lashley's ECW championship at the time, with the whole reason being that Shane McMahon said that you took something that was so special to my father, his hair, so we're going to take the one thing that's special to you, the ECW championship. And Lashley was still getting over, so it's not like crowds were shitting on him or anything like that. So he was a sympathetic babyface in this scenario. Of course, never the greatest mic worker, but without the stick in his hands, he always did perform well. For the most part, he's improved leaps and bounds at this point in time as a performer, in the last couple of years alone since he re-signed with TNA. But in a 3-on-1 handicap scenario, this was not your typical matchup, of course. Umaga doing most of the in-ring work for the team. Shane and Vince also on the team. So a pretty standard handicap matchup. I've just kind of grown numb to watching handicap matches, probably because we see them almost every single fucking week on Raw and SmackDown these days because of heel authority figures. But so maybe that's what kind of hindered my enjoyment of the matchup. But it was fine for the most part. Lashley, held his own. Although he did come up short, of course, he did look strong in defeat against the three heels of Umaga, McMahon, and Shane, or Mr. McMahon and Shane McMahon. So he had the odds stacked against him. He didn't lose anything. He wasn't made to look weak. Just from an enjoyment perspective, I mean, it was only as good as it was going to get. I mean, Lashley versus Umaga at WrestleMania 23 will always be overshadowed for the moment that it transpired after it, with Vince getting his head shaved. And the match itself between Lashley and Umaga wasn't really that good at all. It was entertaining, but it wasn't good. So thankfully, this was not more of a matchup between those two. It was more of an angle than it was a matchup. So they made the most of it. Like I said, Lashley looking strong in defeat. And in the end, it would be Vince McMahon coming out victorious as the new ECW champion. So you can credit any moment that you want as the moment, as the pinpoint any moment as being the moment that ECW was killed. The revival of ECW. You can say the night that the zombie came out in the very first episode, so it died the first night that it was, it came back to life. Or maybe when Big Show won the ECW title or whatever. At least ECW was still worth watching for the most part in late 2006. But when Vince became among those who had held the ECW championship and joined that long lineage of legendary competitors, of Sabu to Shane Douglas to Terry Funk to Tommy Dreamer to Rhino and all these other guys, RVD, that was the moment to a lot of people that killed Extreme Championship Wrestling, WWE's version of it anyway. And the commentators, making it up to be a huge deal. I don't know who it was. It might have been Taz. I think, Taz and Joey Styles were playing it up on commentary. I think they were just, shitting all over it, like, wow, I can't believe it, or whatever. And then you just see JBL just, ecstatic at ringside when Mr. McMahon is celebrating his title win. And, Shane is always a really good athlete, so he held his own in the matchup pretty well, too. But just the moment, I mean, it was like, wow, what happens next? But in the long scheme of things, was it really necessary for Vince to win that belt and not Umaga or Shane or something like that instead? It just seemed like it was pretty pointless when they could have had one of the other guys win that championship instead of Vince, and kind of inserting himself into the storylines in such a prominent fashion, more than he needed to. To get involved in a main event storyline is fine, especially if you're Vince and you're so fucking great at what you do. But to give yourself a title that was, for long respected as one of the most prestigious prizes in the business from its inception in the mid-90s to this point 10 years later, it was a slap in the face to the ECW originals, and I know they did an interview on WWE.com afterwards that I think you can find on YouTube with all these ECW originals, Sabu, Tommy Dreamer, I think Sandman too, saying that Vince, in winning the belt, killed ECW. And I think those comments were more of a shoot than they were a work, and that they legitimately believed that he tarnished the lineage of that championship, tarnished the legacy of that title when he won it. But that was what it was. They made the most of it. Handicap matches are not my forte more often than not, but the moment itself, I guess, was kind of worth it, even though it was not. In the long scheme, it was kind of pointless and stupid, but just to see Shane celebrating with the belt, that was at least something. If anything, if nothing else, at least that was entertaining to me. So that was what it was. Up next, for the World Heavyweight Championship, a last man standing match, the rematch, another WrestleMania rematch, between The Undertaker and Batista. A really, really good matchup. I enjoyed this matchup more than their WrestleMania match. I'd have to go back and watch the other matches they had at Cyber Sunday and Survivor Series. I've seen those matches a million times over before. I've seen almost all of their matches. I think I watched the one on SmackDown at one point. I've seen them all in different forms. I watched the WrestleMania one on Batista's DVD, my WrestleMania when I was watching WrestleMania 23 in its entirety. I watched the other matches, the Cyber Sunday one on Batista's DVD as well, the Cyber Sunday or the Survivor Series one on the Hell in a Cell DVD. So I've seen most of them. I thought if this wasn't the best one, it was definitely among them. All their matches were great, but I thought this one really stood out above the rest. And last man standing matches, and it's an accomplishment because last man standing matches aren't always that exciting. Staying down till 10 is not really that exciting of a stipulation, and as someone mentioned in a comment on one of the wrestling threads that I was reading a couple days ago when it was announced that Roman Reigns versus Big Show was announced for a last man standing match at Extreme Rules. They brought up the fact that they missed the days when last man standing matches meant that you were the last man standing and not getting out of it via gimmickry or anything like that. You beat your opponent to a bloody pulp, and you legitimately were the last man standing. That's the whole point of the matchup. You don't duct tape their feet or, bury them under steel steps. And I'm looking at you, John Cena. But, you know, this is exactly what that was. In a desperate attempt to put The Undertaker down after a really entertaining matchup and a back-and-forth bout, Batista spearing Undertaker off the stage and onto some side stage or whatever it was, and the set came down in a great visual. And, of course, the set didn't hit them, but it looked great, though. And the explosions, the pyrotechnics going off, and it was an amazing visual. They replayed time, you know, over and over again, because it looked awesome, and I thought it was really, really cool. So, a really, really good match. Like I said before, the chemistry that Batista and Undertaker had was always great in all their matches that they had in 2007. Like I said before as well, one of, if not the best bout that I've seen them have. Of all the matches that they had in 2007, I thought it was spectacular. It protected both guys. It was way too early for Undertaker to drop the title, and Batista didn't take another loss consecutively on pay-per-view. So it protected both guys, continued the feud, and I thought the action overall was really, really entertaining. So that brings us to the main event, a fatal four-way match for the WWE Championship, pitting the then-champion John Cena against Edge, Randy Orton, and Shawn Michaels. And I forgot to mention this before, but there was one backstage segment that we had earlier on in the show, which was, it legit made me laugh out loud. It was so great, and you can find it on YouTube too. I tweeted it out a couple days ago, along with a screenshot that I took on my phone when the segment was going on when I was watching on the WWE Network. It's Randy Orton and John Cena backstage, and Orton approaches Cena about teaming up against Michaels and Edge and taking them out of the equation, then going at it for themselves in the main event. Of course, John Cena refuses, but Orton says that he like indirectly calls John Cena handsome or something like that, and he says they're gonna double team these guys, and then they're gonna get it on later tonight, like all these using these sexual innuendos, like, you know, obviously unconsciously, whatever. You know, just not on purpose. And then John Cena picks up on that and makes a joke out of it. He's like, whoa, 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 I'm not about that. I know that's your thing. I know that's what you do. And then he kind of mocks his pose and does it in a way where I can't even describe it. I know this is only audio. I would do this for you if it was a video. But the way that he mocks Orton's pose legitimately made me laugh out loud. I had to go back and watch it a few times, and I still laugh at it watching it like all these days later. So fucking funny. And like I said before, you can find it on YouTube if you just type in Orton and Cena Backlash 07 backstage segment, whatever. Really, really funny. Orton was great here. Cena was great here. Just a really, really funny segment. Probably one of the highlights of Backlash for me. Along with the main event, I thought the main event was absolutely phenomenal. The main feud going in here was Cena and Shawn Michaels, of course, you know, stemming from their WrestleMania match and having one of the greatest matches in Raw history, only 6 days prior, going almost an hour. So that matchup, you know, their Backlash bout would pale in comparison to that. You just can't top that. But to their credit, they came very fucking close. The match itself, the Fatal 4-Way bout, was great. And I noted this on Twitter while I was watching it, but you know, and I said the same thing about the triple threat match at Backlash 06 the year prior. Maybe Backlash is the place for great multi-man matches. I know we would get another Fatal 4-Way the following year, but I thought this Fatal 4-Way was phenomenal. And multi-man matches can either be hit or miss, like the one at WrestleMania 2000 was a total miss. And then when you have the right players, you tell the right story, you can strike gold. And that's absolutely what these 4 guys did. They went out there and struck fucking gold. Like I said, Cena and Michaels had their history stemming from WrestleMania. Edge and Orton, former tag team champions, tag team partners. And they were kind of on the verge of splitting up as well. We would never really get the culmination of that feud, oddly enough. And then, you know, you also had, of course, had the history between Orton and Cena, and Edge and Michaels, and all this. All 4 guys had established issues with each other, kind of dating back to the start of the year, when Cena and Michaels beat Edge and Orton for the World Tag Team titles. So these 4 guys all had a lot of great history, a lot of great chemistry, that's for sure. And watching this matchup, they all kind of went against each other. Alliances were formed only for them to implode moments later. So your typical Fatal 4-Way with, you know, all the elements, the imploding elements of all 4 guys teaming up and going against each other. But just the way that it was executed and everything about it was so fucking great. They got a lot of good time, almost 20 minutes. And just a lot of exciting action. I mean, I know the ending outcome was never in doubt, because I knew Cena going in was going to win. But even those, I mean, even those people that knew that John Cena was going to win, I know there was a poll that was conducted on the WWE, not app, but like through their text poll or whatever it was, the AT&T poll. People texted in who they thought was going to win, and I think John Cena got like 50 or 60% of the vote. And despite that, people legitimately thought at various moments that this person could win, this person could win, because you have 4 guys that could relatively realistically hit their finishers out of nowhere, with the exception of John Cena. But even to an extent, he can pick someone on his shoulders very, very quickly and hit the AA. But with Michaels, you have the sweet chin music. With Edge, you had the spear. And with Orton, you had the RKO. So that's what made it for one of the most exciting Fatal 4-Ways that I've ever seen anyway. And that all the elements were there, all the key components, all the key players, putting forth a very strong outing. And like I said, I'd have to go back and watch some other Fatal 4-Ways, but I struggle to think of another Fatal 4-Way that was this good from recent memory. Just amazing stuff. And then you get to the finish, and let me see if I can recall this correctly. And I think John Cena hits it. He hits it. What was it? I think he hits an AA on Michaels, I want to say. What was it? He hits an AA, I think on Edge or Michaels or wherever. And then, no, excuse me, I apologize. Orton hits an RKO. I'm so confused here, but it was a great finish though. I'm not doing it justice in describing it in this way, but Orton hits the RKO on Shawn Michaels, like almost out of nowhere. And then he tries to go for an RKO on John Cena, who reverses it, pushes Orton right into a spear, a beautiful spear from Edge. So Orton's down for the count. John Cena picks up Edge, hits him with an AA. Shawn Michaels gets back up, hits John Cena with a sweet chin music, who lands perfectly on a Randy Orton, who again was hit with the spear only moments earlier. And Michaels, not realizing a count was being made, doesn't even try to break it up. He's just oblivious to what's going on right now. When he finally realizes it's too late, John Cena, and laying on top of Randy Orton after being sweet chin music to the, unconsciously out cold, lands on top of Orton, gets the 3 count, and retains his WWE title. A fantastic finish, and that we really haven't seen much of, if at all. From what I understand, from what I remember anyway, to my memory, I have not seen a finish like that before, or at least in this type of environment. I thought it was just absolutely phenomenal. I thought it was a fantastic finish to just, like I said before, a phenomenal Fatal 4-Way matchup. So easily the best match of the night. If you had to watch one match from this show, it would be the main event. And people were shitting on John Cena going into it, getting the typical 50-50 cheers and boos and whatever. But by the end of the matchup, people weren't booing as much because they respected what they just saw in the, bearing witness to one of the greatest matches in recent memory. One of the greatest multi-man matches in recent memory. So just phenomenal stuff. And not making you forget about Cena Michaels from the week prior on Monday Night Raw, but just showing that, did you think we wouldn't top that? I mean, they didn't top it, but they came pretty fucking close. So easily the match of the night right there. The undercard was not too strong. A lot of solid matches. I thought Benoit and MVP was pretty good. A nice solid undercard matchup. Molina versus Mickie James, good for what it was. Not much of a storytelling matchup. Same thing with the opener for the World Tag Team titles. The Handicap matchup, for what it was, fine. And it furthered the story. That's really all that I could say about it. Not really the most exciting or greatest matchup ever, but for what it was, it served a purpose. I will say that much. It wasn't a complete waste. So at least it furthered a story. But the pay-per-view itself is well worth watching for the main events alone, between Batista, Taker, and then the Fatal 4-Way. I thought both those matches exceeded expectations and were just absolutely amazing. So go back and watch Backlash 07 on the WWE Network for those 2 matches alone, and the rest of the pay-per-view kind of fills that well. The pay-per-view is only like 2.5 hours long. Most pay-per-views come close to 3 hours. Some are 2 hours and 45 minutes. This one, I think, was only like 2 hours and 36 minutes. So it's on the shorter side in terms of other Backlash pay-per-views that I've watched up to this point. So it's a quick watch in comparison to the other ones. So make sure to check it out. Really good show considering, on the whole, the undercard was good and the main events were just fantastic. So check it out at your leisure. So I'll be back on Saturday with my final Backlash review of Backlash 2008. Just a great show all around. I mean, Backlash, since 1999, like I've said in every single review, has been awesome. Every single installment has had something to offer from an amazing standpoint, and that's why I enjoyed watching these events so much. And I've yet to watch Backlash 07. I am excited to do so because, as I've said before, I kind of grew up in 2000 as a wrestling fan. Did I say 07? I meant 08. I apologize. But I kind of grew up as a wrestling fan in 2008, and I had yet actually to watch Backlash 2008. I've seen One Night Stand, WrestleMania, SummerSlam, all these other pay-per-views, Survivor Series, Royal Rumble. I have yet to see the Backlash installment from that year. So I'm excited to watch that. I'll be back on, what is today? Tuesday. So I'll be back on Saturday with that. And to answer all the questions and stuff that I've been getting on Twitter recently, at WrestleRant Cheap Plug, I will be reviewing all the Extreme Rules pay-per-views starting this Sunday. So actually on the night that Extreme Rules this year, kind of kicks off, I was kind of planning Extreme Rules reviews before Extreme Rules, but it is what it is. It's only like 5 or 6 of them to review. So I'm going to be reviewing Extreme Rules right after Backlash 08. So Saturday is Backlash 08 review, Extreme Rules 2010 review on Sunday. So for those that are wondering why I skipped Backlash 09 or Extreme Rules 09, it's because my reviews of those shows are already up here on the channel. I reviewed them last year, so make sure to go back and check those out right here in the WrestleRant video series. Also, make sure to find me on Facebook at graham.gsm.matthews, facebook.com, that is /graham.gsm.matthews. On Twitter at WrestleRant. Make sure to check out my website, nextEraWrestling.net, for reviews dating back to fucking 2010, so 5 years back. Another great content from other guest columnists and stuff like that. So make sure to check out nextEraWrestling.net. And of course, make sure to like, comment, share, and subscribe. All support is greatly appreciated. And as I said before, I'll be back on Saturday with my review of Backlash 2008. Have a great week, guys, and I'll catch you guys then.